What is up, guys? My name is Keggernaut, but just call me Kegg, and this is going to finally be the Vengeance Demon Hunter tanking guide for patch 7.0 in Legion. It's been a long time coming, but it's finally here, and I think we should just get along right with it. So, Vengeance Demon Hunters, they are the newest tanking class added to World of Warcraft with the Legion expansion, and this guide is going to be focusing on those, obviously. So, over the course of me playing Vengeance Demon Hunter the past couple weeks, I found them to be a very complicated class. They're not easy to play. They're very fun to play. Definitely they're fun to play. They got a very engaging rotation and play style, things like that. But it's not something that you can just pick up real quick and watch a video like mine and just be good with it. You've got to actually put the time in to practice, and you've got to put the time in to know the fights and know what you're going to do and know what your abilities do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to help structure this video a little bit. I'm going to put some links up on the screen right now that are going to take you to other parts of the video. So if you want to see specifically just the talents, then you could look at that right now. If you want to see the artifact weapon, if you want to see spells and abilities, things like that, then you could look at them here, and I'll leave them up for a few seconds, and after that we'll just continue on with the guide. Okay, so with that, let's go right into the spell book. And the first spell that we have here is called Consume Magic. This is your interrupt, and you use this and it interrupts a spell that's being casted. It's got a 20-yard range. That's very important to remember. It's got a 20-yard range. It's not something that I knew right off the bat. I'm used to playing a monk and a druid, so it's really just kind of like a very short range burst. Not a burst, but an interrupt. This is a 20-yard range, so you can definitely get those mobs that are kind of just out there and you can't really reach. You can get those with ease. And additionally, it generates 50 pain on a successful interrupt. So you're going to want to make sure that you can interrupt as many things as possible, because it's just free pain, therefore either more DPS or more healing. You kind of just use it for what you need. Demon Spikes, this is your next ability. It's your main form of active mitigation. It's going to cost you 20 pain, and you're going to surge with fell power, increasing your parry chance by 20% and reducing physical damage taken by 41% for 6 seconds. Now, 41%, that's affected by mastery, so my value is going to be different than your value, but either way it works the same. And basically what you're going to want to do is, if you're taking physical damage or you're about to take physical damage, you're going to want to press Demon Spikes in order to help mitigate that. The parry chance is nice for when you're being attacked by a lot of mobs. You just have a higher chance to parry because you're getting attacked more often. But really, the main component of Demon Spikes that we're looking at is that physical damage reduction. So you're going to want to make sure that you know when to use this at the right time, because this is one of those very high skill talents. Well, not a talent, an ability. Like, if you don't know the right time to use this, then you're going to have a tough time, because a lot of new demon hunters, either they won't use Demon Spikes because they want to use that pain on Soul Cleave for more DPS or more healing, and therefore they're taking all this extra damage, or they use Demon Spikes back to back. They'll use Demon Spikes, and then right when it falls off, they'll use another one. And if you do that, then you'll fall into a situation where there's this long period of time where you don't have any Demon Spikes available to you, and therefore you're just getting whacked in the face extremely hard, and you can't really do anything about it. You just have to kind of take it and deal with it. So the best thing to learn is how to stagger these, or to know when is the most optimal time to use them, and that just comes with player skill and player knowledge. Empower Wards reduces magical damage taken by 30% for 6 seconds. It's got a 20-second cooldown. This is your other source of active mitigation. This will reduce magical damage. Demon Spikes reduces physical damage. Pretty simple. Fell Devastation is a talent. I'll get to that later. Fell Blade is also a talent. I'll get to that later. Fiery Brand. Okay, this is a 30-yard range, 1-minute cooldown spell. You're going to brand a single enemy, and it's going to do a lot of fire damage right off the bat, and then it's going to reduce the damage they do to you by 40% for 10 seconds. This is a very powerful cooldown, but it only works on one single target, unless you modify it with a talent later that I'm going to talk about. But really, it's only just one target. So if you're fighting a group of ads and you know that one ad is particularly hard hitting, they've got like a giant cleave strike, or they've got a big spell that they're going to cast, then you can use Fiery Brand on them and to help mitigate that damage. Or what you can do is, most likely on a boss fight is when you're going to use this. On a boss fight, you can use it before a big hitting spell, or if you just have no resources available to you, you can use Fiery Brand in order to ease that gap between you not having any pain or not having any demon spikes, things like that. Fracture is also a talent. I'll get to that later. Immolation Aura. You're going to burst in flames, dealing a lot of fire damage right away to all enemies within 8 yards, and then you're going to start pulsing out fire damage every second for 6 seconds. This will generate 20 pain over its duration, and basically how you're going to want to use this is you just use it on cooldown. It's an extremely powerful ability. It's very hard hitting. It scales well with the more enemies around you, and also you're going to want to press it on cooldown just because it generates that 20 pain. And you don't have that much pain to begin with. That's why you have to press sheer so often, and I'm going to get to the sheer in a little bit, but having that 20 pain over 6 seconds just helps to smooth resource generation. Infernal Strike. This is your heroic leap ability. It's got 2 charges on a 20-second cooldown. You're going to leap through the air at a targeted location, dealing fire damage when you land, and also will move you over there. Basically, just if you need to get somewhere, just leap over, and then that's it. There's no other thought. Metamorphosis. This is your main defensive cooldown. It's a 3-minute cooldown, and you're going to transform into demon form for 15 seconds, increasing current and maximum health by 30%, and additionally generating 7 pain every 1 second. So basically how this works is, if you're sitting at 60% health, right, and you pop Metamorphosis, that's going to increase your current health by 30%, and it's also going to increase your maximum health pool by 30%. So right now I have 2.9 million health. If I were to press this, then I would go up to, let's say, 3.3 or 3.4 million health, if my quick mental math is correct. So I'm going to have a larger health pool, and I'm also going to get a pretty substantial heal out of pressing Metamorphosis. Additionally, because I'm generating so much pain every second, that means I'm going to be able to generate a lot more soul cleaves. Therefore, I'm going to be able to do more DPS if that's what I want to use it for, or I'll be able to use it for a lot of healing. Generally, you're going to want it for healing because this is a very long cooldown. It's your defensive cooldown. It's one of your only ones besides Fiery Brand, so you're going to want to make sure that you save this for when you need it. Our next ability is Sheer. This is our filler spell. If we have nothing else available to press, or if we're just strapped for pain, then we're going to be pressing Sheer and Sheer and Sheer. That's a lot of how the class plays. You're just going to be spamming Sheer. Sigil of Flame is the next ability. You just place a sigil on the ground that erupts after 2 seconds, dealing fire damage initially, and then puts a dot on all targets affected, which are going to do fire damage over time. And I'll show you how it looks like right now. It actually looks pretty cool. And there you go, that's Sigil of Flame. Now, Sigil of Misery, this works the same way as Sigil of Flame, except after 2 seconds when it explodes, it's going to fear everybody caught inside for 30 seconds. This does not include friendly targets, only enemies. So I'll show you what it looks like now. It's on a minute cooldown. It's basically the same sort of a symbol, but it's just purple. Same thing with Sigil of Silence. They act all the same way, but Sigil of Silence is going to silence all enemies affected by 6 seconds. This is very good for if there's an ad out of reach that your consume magic can't work on, or you can't get a stun over there. Then let's say if these purple guys over here are casting a spell, or I just want to move them closer in without having to actually move myself, I can just cast Sigil of Silence over there. That silences their spell cast, and then they start to move over to me, and I can tank them in a safe spot where I want them. Soul Carver is our next ability. It's actually our artifact ability. It's got a 40-second cooldown, and it's going to do a lot of fire damage to a single target right off the bat. And then over 3 seconds, it's going to do more fire damage. And initially, once you press this, you're going to generate 2 soul fragments, and then over the course of that 3-second duration, it's going to generate 3 more soul fragments. So the total amount of soul fragments that you'll gain from this is 5, and therefore it makes a pretty substantial heal the next time you press Soul Cleave. Now, I've looked around, and some other guides will say to use Soul Carver on cooldown just as a DPS increase, because the soul fragments you gain, they're not a very substantial amount of healing. And I agree with that a little bit. When you only have 1 or 2 soul fragments, it's not a lot of healing, so therefore you can afford to just use it on cooldown, I guess. But when you've got 4 or 5 soul fragments, when you couple that with a maxed out soul cleave, it's a very, very potent heal, and therefore you're going to want to use this, in my opinion, when you're preparing for a lot of incoming damage. Therefore you can get a very nice heal out of it and help sustain yourself. Or if you're not worried about your survivability and you know that you're not going to die, or you know that you can use this within the next 40 seconds and not have to take those soul fragments, then you can use Soul Carver for the additional DPS. The next ability is Soul Cleave. This is your meat and potatoes. This is the main spell of the Vengeance Demon Hunter. It's going to cost between 30 and 60 pain, and you're going to strike all enemies in front of you, so it is AoE damage. You're going to strike all enemies in front of you, and you're also going to heal based on the pain spent. So if you do a 30 pain Soul Cleave, the minimum amount, then you're going to do very little damage and you're going to do very little healing. The ideal situation for you to press Soul Cleave in all circumstances is going to be a 60 pain Soul Cleave. It's not that hard to maintain because you generate pain by taking damage, you generate pain by pressing Shear, you generate pain by interrupting stuff with Consume Magic, and you also generate pain with Immolation Aura. So you have a lot of pain at your disposal, and you're going to want to make sure that you get the max amount of heal or the max amount of damage that you can from pressing Soul Cleave. Although it is advised that if you need an emergency heal, like you just got chunked and you're at 40% HP and you only got 40 pain, then you might want to just Soul Cleave there if you feel that you might die within the next few seconds. Our next ability is called Throw Glaive. It's got a 3-second cooldown and a 30-yard range. This works as a Protection Paladin's Avenger's Shield. You just lob it over at the enemy and it ricochets up to 2 other targets and it generates high threat. Torment is your taunt. You just use this when needed. Usually you're going to taunt off of an enemy that has aggro, or if you're going to taunt off a tank in order to take a hit or to start acquiring a debuff that the boss puts on you guys. Demonic Wards. This is your passive that you're going to gain from just being a Vengeance Demon Hunter. This sets you apart from the Havoc spec. It's going to increase your stamina by 45%. It's going to reduce the magic damage you take by 10% and increase your armor by 120%. Mastery, Fell Blood. This is our mastery. Demon Spikes reduces physical damage taken by an additional percent and also increases your attack power by a certain percent as well. And Shatter Souls, basically just whenever you kill a target, you're going to generate a greater soul fragment that will heal you for a very large amount, and if it is a demon's soul, then you'll also gain 20% increased damage for 15 seconds. This really only takes place in world content. This doesn't have a very strong place in dungeons, and it almost never ever procs during raids, so that's nothing that you really have to worry about. Now onward to the talent section. I'm going to go row by row telling you what each talent does and if I think it's good or not, and then afterwards I'm going to show you certain talent builds that I think work really well in certain situations. Row 99, basically Agonizing Flames is the only way to go. It's going to increase the movement speed while Immolation Aura is active by 30%, and Immolation Aura is going to deal 50% increased damage. Abyssal Strike. Infernal Strike's range is increased by 10 yards and its cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds. This is the only other option really in this talent tier, but even then it's only good for when you're doing world quests or when you're leveling. Agonizing Flames is just too good to pass up with its increased damage on Immolation Aura. Razor Spikes currently is extremely underperforming between the other two talents. While Demon Spikes is active, you gain 20% increased physical damage, not fire damage, physical damage, and your melee attack snare targets by 50% for 6 seconds. If you need to kite, then you can possibly use this, but this just is not worth it because you can just move faster with Immolation Aura anyway when using Agonizing Flames. And when you use Razor Spikes, that means you have to use Demon Spikes as an offensive cooldown, not strictly a defensive cooldown, and in most cases that's not the ideal way to use it. Row 100, Feast of Souls. Soul Cleave heals for an additional amount, not percent, over 6 seconds. Therefore, every time you Soul Cleave, you're just going to have more sustainability because you're just going to get some free healing, and it's going to help stabilize your health so it's not so spiky. Fallout. Immolation Aura's initial burst has a chance to shatter lesser soul fragments from enemies. So when you first press Immolation Aura, that first initial explosion that comes out of you, that's what's going to trigger these lesser soul fragments from these enemies. It's very, very good in dungeons, or it's very, very good in just any situation that there's multiple targets, because those soul fragments, like I said before, when you have a high amount of them, it's a very nice substantial heal. So therefore, if there's 2 or even 3 more targets, then Fallout is going to perform better than Feast of Souls. Feast of Souls really only works in single target situations. Burning Alive. Every 2 seconds, your fiery brand deals fire damage and spreads from the primary target to a nearby enemy. Now, this doesn't mean that if I target one person and then the debuff spreads to person B, After 2 seconds, it'll also spread from person B to person C. That's not how it works. The debuff only spreads from person A, so therefore, over its duration of 8 seconds or 10 seconds, you can only get a maximum of 4 or 5 debuffs out on a group of ads. So therefore, it's not that great because it's only going to do minor fire damage every 2 seconds, but it is very, very important if you want to be doing Mythic Plus dungeons. In Mythic Plus dungeons, I found Fallout to be very good, but additionally, Burning Alive does have its place, because what you'll do is you'll pull a pack of ads, right? Let's say you're pulling one of the groups in the beginning of Halls of Valor where they hurt really hard and there's just a lot of them. You can use Burning Alive right off the bat on a priority target, and that's going to start reducing the damage you take from them by 40%. And over 10 seconds, it's going to spread to 5 other targets, therefore making your survivability in those very large trash pools very, very high. Row 102. Fellblade. Charge to your target within 15 yards and deal fire damage to them. Shear has a chance to reset the cooldown of Fellblade, and Fellblade will generate 20 pain upon use. This is a very, very nice talent, and it's a hotly debated talent as well. Some people like to use this in every single situation because of that extra 20 pain and because it's an extra button to press, therefore further complicating the rotation. But really, I like this talent, but I don't feel that it really has its use in any other situation besides single target. When it's not single target, Flame Crash I think works a lot better, because every time you Infernal Strike, it's going to create a sigil of flame when you land, and I'll show you guys what that looks like right now. I'm going to Infernal Strike, and upon hitting the ground, I'm going to generate a sigil of flame. And there you go, that's the sigil of flame exploding right there. Fell Eruption. It's going to cost 10 pain, 20 yard range, and a 35-second cooldown. Impale the target for chaos damage, not fire damage, chaos damage, and stuns them for 2 seconds, inflicting an additional 100% damage against targets permanently immune to stuns. So basically this means that if you're fighting a boss, this really is not going to stun, so therefore you're going to get that double damage. But if you are fighting anything else that can be stunned, it will stun them and not give you that double damage. Now, really, back in beta, this was actually an okay talent to choose because it did do a lot more damage than it did before. Well, than it does now. But now it's just not worth taking unless you absolutely, positively need that 2-second stun. But in every situation that I've done so far, in Mythic Dungeons, in Mythic Plus Dungeons, in Raids, I haven't had a use for those 2-second stuns. So therefore, it's not really worth picking, even if you wanted to use it for a DPS increase, because it does do chaos damage. So therefore, Charred Warblades on your artifact weapon will not trigger that 15% leech from fire damage. Row 104, Feed the Demon. Consuming a soul fragment reduces the remaining cooldown of demon spikes by 1 second. So every time that you consume a soul fragment, it'll reduce the cooldown of your active mitigation by 1 second. This is pretty powerful for introductory Vengeance Demon Hunter. If you're a new tank, if you're a new Demon Hunter in general, Feed the Demon works really well. It works better than Soul Rending, and it works better than Fracture. Although I would recommend that if you are going to use Feed the Demon in any level of play, whether you're a new Vengeance Demon Hunter or an expert Demon Hunter, I recommend only using Feed the Demon if you're also going to run Fallout, because the amount of soul fragments that you generate by using Shear is not enough to warrant using Feed the Demon. You just won't get enough cooldown reduction on demon spikes. However, when using Fallout, you have a lot higher chance to generate more soul fragments, therefore giving you more cooldown reduction and more uptime on demon spikes. Fracture is the next ability on this tier. It's going to cost you 40 pain, and you're going to brutally slam into your target, doing a lot of physical damage, and it's going to shatter 2 lesser soul fragments from them. Now, currently, if this was doing more damage like it did back in beta, then this would be a lot better to use, but the amount of damage that it does and the soul fragments that it generates is not worth the 40 pain cost. You can use this if you only want to increase your damage, and additionally increase your damage in only single target situations. But if that's not feasible or you don't want to do that, then it's not worth taking. Soul Rending. Gain 50% leech while Metamorphosis is active. This is my current favorite, although I do like Feed the Demon for most situations. I do think Soul Rending is the obvious default choice, especially after getting fueled by Pain, the golden dragon to the left of your artifact weapon, because having that 50% leech makes Metamorphosis actually a worthy cooldown. Currently, in its base state, Metamorphosis is not very powerful on its own. It only does a very minor heal and generates resource for you, making you do the healing. If it did some damage reduction component, then it would be pretty good, but currently it's not that great. By having Soul Rending with the 50% leech on Metamorphosis, that makes the damage that you do very, very good, because that's also going to give you a lot of healing. Therefore, if you need to use this preemptively or you need to use it reactively, then you're going to have that benefit of the 50% leech. When you activate Metamorphosis, the actual cooldown, when you pop into Metamorphosis every now and then from your artifact weapon, or if you end up proccing Last Resort when you die, you will get that 50% leech, therefore making it very powerful. Row 106. This is purely preferential. I do not like concentrated sigils, however. I should probably note that, because having them only fall at your feet does not make sigils worth it, in my opinion. The whole point of sigils, I think, is to actually place them where you want. So currently, if I wanted to place Sigil of Flame over and grab these adds over here, I couldn't do that with concentrated sigils. It just falls at my feet. However, if I'm using Quicken Sigils or Sigil of Chains, then I'll be able to, let's say, like I said before, just throw a Sigil of Silence on these guys over there, and then have them be silenced and start running over to me. If I had concentrated sigils, I'd have to jump over there and then jump back. It's just not worth it, in my opinion. Sigil of Chains. This is one thing that I really like to use while in dungeons, but only certain dungeons though, especially ones where there's a lot of adds that like to run around, or there's a lot of adds that just like to cast, and I already used Sigil of Silence. You place it at the target location, and it's going to pull everybody in it to the center after 2 seconds. And then after they are pulled in, they are going to be snared for, I believe, it's 70% for 6 seconds. I really like this talent, although I do think Quicken Sigils does the job perfectly fine. Quicken Sigils. All sigils activate 1 second faster, and their cooldowns are reduced by 20%. I like this because in dungeons there's a lot of mobs that like to cast stuff, and you always don't have an interrupt. You might not have an interrupt available for every single cast. So Quicken Sigils makes it so that when they are casting something, you don't have to wait the 2 seconds for the sigil to actually explode. You only have to wait that 1 second, making it a very, very reliable way of interrupting multiple adds when you need that interrupt right away. Row 108, Fell Devastation. It's going to cost you 30 pain, and it's a 1 minute cooldown. You're going to unleash the Fel within you, damaging enemies directly in front of you for fire damage over 2 seconds, and causing damage also heals you for up to 800,000 health. Now, I believe this is the very clear winner out of all the talents in this tier, because it is a lot of burst damage, and it's a lot of burst fire damage, may I add, so you will get that leech healing from Charred Warblades on your artifact weapon. Additionally, it's very on-demand healing. If you've just taken a giant spike of health, or if you know that you're going to be receiving a lot of incoming damage very soon, then you can use Fell Devastation at the same time in order to smooth out that damage intake, or to quickly top you off after getting hit very hard. Blade Turning. Parrying an attack increases the pain generation of your next shear by 50%. Now that means that every time you parry, your next shear generates 15 pain instead of 10 pain. Back in the beta, this was 100% of the next time you use shear, therefore making it 20 pain. And currently, I believe that was the best iteration of this talent, although I can see that it was extremely powerful and an OP back in the beta, therefore that's why it was nerfed. Right now, it just doesn't do enough pain generation to warrant this cost. Additionally, you don't parry that often anyway, unless in a situation where you have a lot of mobs attacking you. Spirit Bomb. 40-yard range, launch a nearby soul fragment at your target, dealing shadow damage to all nearby enemies and afflicting them with frailty for 15 seconds. You heal for 10% of all damage you deal to enemies with frailty. So I don't like this talent, particularly because I don't think that it's just strong. It's just not strong. Additionally, it's not responsive. I've tried to use this plenty of times where I can very visually see that I am in range within 2, 3, even 4 lesser soul fragments, and I'm trying to spam this ability in order for it to actually activate, but it just never works. Also, that 10% leech healing that you get on everybody that's affected by frailty, it's okay healing over the course of a fight, but that small trickle healing isn't going to matter much when you get chunked very, very fast, or if just all the enemies start actually attacking you quicker, or something like in Black Royal Cold when they drink that potion and they start to attack a lot faster, they do this frenzy. Spirit Bomb is not going to get the job done in those situations. I believe Fell Devastation when you're taking a lot of damage is going to be a lot better. It's not a lot of healing over time, but it is a lot of on-demand healing, and I feel that's a very important way in order to play this class. Additionally, it's just an extra cooldown, so I mean, why not? Row 110, Last Resort. Sustaining fatal damage instead transforms you to Metamorphosis form and returns you to 30% health. This effect may only occur once every 3 minutes. Now, this is basically a better version of the Blood Death Knight's Purgatory talent. Instead of having a negative health pool, you will just instantly return to 30% health and go into Metamorphosis, therefore making you generate a lot more pain and being able to soul cleave very, very often. Additionally, like I mentioned before, Soul Rending will take effect while in Last Resort Metamorphosis form, and you will receive that increased healing, therefore making it easier to top you off after taking fatal damage. And clearly, I think this is the best, the absolute best option for any progression content. Nether Bond, 2-minute cooldown, 40-yard range. Bind yourself to a friendly player for 15 seconds. Every 1 second, the health of you and your target is redistributed such that you are at the same percentage of maximum health. Now, I don't think this is very powerful when you consider the other two talents that you have available in this tier. It basically acts like a spirit link totem from a shaman for you and one other target. Usually you'll do this on your co-tank, but if you're not using this while raiding, then you can possibly use it on a target that's affected with a high damage dot, or if they're affected by a charge mechanic on some bosses, you can use this to help smooth that damage. Although in most situations, you and your group should be able to handle that other ways, and therefore Nether Bond won't be needed. Soul Barrier, 30 pain, 20-second cooldown. Shield yourself for 8 seconds, absorbing a large amount of damage, consuming soul fragments, add additional value to the shield. Soul Barrier's absorption cannot be reduced below a certain amount, and additionally consumes all soul fragments within 20 yards. So basically this works like Soul Cleave, but a little bit cheaper. So instead of Soul Cleave healing you like it does already, Soul Barrier acts to prevent that damage in the first place, instead of you having to actually take that damage first. Now I can see that newer Vengeance Demon Hunters might want this, because it acts like how Brewmaster's Guard used to work, and we all know Guard was a very, very powerful talent. But the current Absorption Shield is not powerful. It's not big enough to warrant me taking this. I don't believe this is the best talent. One, because just like with Spirit Bomb, it doesn't really work very often. It's not as responsive I'd like it to be. I'd want that shield right away. Once I press the spell, I want it to happen, but for me it just doesn't work. I don't know if it's a lag input or something, but I've tried it over multiple dungeons and it doesn't seem to work when I want it to, so therefore I don't like to pick it. But also I do believe that the shield absorption value is not high enough to warrant picking this, because currently in almost any sort of difficulty of Emerald Nightmare currently, one boss melee swing, just a normal auto attack that they do, will instantly deplete the entire shield that you've just built up. You might have spent 5 soul fragments and 30 pain on pressing this ability, and therefore after that one melee swing, that entire shield is already gone. Now, it does say in the tooltip that the absorption cannot be reduced below a certain amount, so you can add more soul fragments to it, therefore making it a larger shield, but still, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. In all forms of progression content, you can go for Last Resort and have a lot better chances of success. Although, I will say that if you don't see yourself dying, if you know that you won't die, and you know that there's not a possibility of you to die, then therefore you don't have to take Last Resort, because you know that there's not a chance for it to proc. Therefore, if you want, you could take Nether Bond to help out the group, or you can take Soul Barrier to help out yourself. But either way, I do recommend Last Resort in almost every situation. Now, currently what you see on screen is my recommended talent build for any sort of dungeon content. I do like Sigil of Chains a lot for grouping up mobs, but if you don't need to group up the mobs, then you can just use Quicken Sigils in order for that extra utility. Additionally, what you see now is what I usually like to run with while doing any sort of world content, in most dungeon content, and even in some raid content. This is what I'll run with as well. Although in a lot of bosses in Emerald Nightmare, I believe that this might be the correct path to go for, because there is a lot of single target situations where having that increased pain generation with Fellblade, and also that increased damage smoothing with Feast of Souls healing you over time, is going to be a lot better. Okay, so with that, let's go into the stat priorities and gear. Currently, I'm item level 855, and so you could see what the percent values might look like for you if you're around this item level. Crit is going to give you a double chance. Well, it's going to give you a chance for your damage to do 2 times as much damage, and also your healing to do twice as much healing. Haste is going to reduce the global cooldown, so that little time in between each attack where you can't do anything else is going to reduce that time, and additionally it's going to reduce the cooldown on Fellblade, Demon Spikes, Immolation Aura, and Throw Glaive. Those are very important spells that could use with that cooldown reduction, but either way, that's just something to know. Mastery. Demon Spikes reduces physical damage taken by an additional percent and also increases your attack power by a certain percent as well. Versatility increases damage and healing done by a certain percent and decreases damage taken by half of that value. Avoidance reduces damage taken from area of effect attacks. So if there's a ground pound, if there's a pool of acid on the floor, if you're getting hit by a dragon's breath attack, avoidance will help to reduce that damage taken. Dodge, you just have a chance to completely dodge an attack. Take no damage from it. Parry works the same way. You have a chance to parry an attack, completely negating the damage of that attack. Currently, my stat priority for dungeon content and Mythic Plus dungeons is going to be Agility, Mastery, Crit, Versatility, and then Haste. For raids, it's going to be Agility, Versatility, Haste, Mastery, and then Crit. Now, I've had a lot of controversy on my Quick and Dirty video about my stat priority. On that video, I only showcased the one for dungeon content, as at the time of uploading that was the only form of content available. But now, since raids are out, I thought that I would put both stat priorities in the video, and I'll actually explain right now why I go over those. Okay, so starting off with the dungeon stat priority, the reason why I choose Mastery over Crit, over Versatility, and over Haste is because in dungeons, you're going to be actively tanking for short bursts of time. So trash pack, and then after you kill that trash pack, you have some downtime, and then you pull another trash pack. In between that downtime, your healer has some time to pick everybody up, your DPS has some times for their cooldowns to come back up, and additionally you have a chance for your Demon Spikes to be off of cooldown as well, both charges of Demon Spikes. So, Mastery, in those short bursts of active tanking, you're going to get the most value out of that physical damage reduction with Demon Spikes, because you don't have to constantly maintain that buff over long periods of actively tanking like you have to do in boss fights. You're going to get a lot more value out of Mastery, because in dungeons it's 80% trash, 20% bosses. Additionally, the attack power that you gain from Mastery is going to be very, very beneficial over the course of everything. It's going to provide you with more burst damage. It's going to provide you with more healing. It's going to provide you with more physical damage reduction on Demon Spikes, like I mentioned before. Crit falls next because in dungeon content, you just have to get all the adds down as quick as possible in order to make the run quicker, and also so you have a less chance of dying. Crit is going to help do more damage and also to do more healing. In dungeons, you're going to be taking a lot of damage very, very quickly, and therefore when you do Soul Cleave, you have a very high chance when you have high crit values in order to gain a very big and massive chunk of healing from Soul Cleave. Whereas something like Versatility, where it only increases slightly the amount of healing, then it's not as potent. And talking about Versatility, the reason why I rank it third is because it's going to increase your damage done, just like Mastery will and Critical Strike will, but Versatility works very minor. It's only going to increase your damage done by 8%, whereas Mastery is going to increase your attack power, which is going to affect all of your abilities, not just your damage. So, therefore, that's something to think about. And also is going to increase your healing done. So I guess it works a little bit like Mastery, but you will get more benefit anyway because Demon Spikes has a lot more value in dungeons than it does in raids. Haste. The reason why I rank this last is because, like I said before, you're only actively tanking for short bursts at a time. So therefore you don't have to keep those cooldowns of Demon Spikes active for very long. So therefore you don't have to have that much haste. Yes, having a shorter global cooldown and yes, having a shorter cooldown on Immolation Aura will increase DPS. You will gain more DPS overall by going for Mastery and Crit over Haste. Now, the reason why for the rating stat priority I choose versatility, haste, mastery, and then crit is because, like I mentioned in raids, boss fights take a very long time. Sometimes they can be upwards of 8 minutes, sometimes even 10 minutes. Therefore, versatility is going to help reduce that overall damage taken over the course of very long periods of time, including when you don't have demon spikes active. It will work with demon spikes active as well, but while you don't have it active, versatility is going to help decrease that damage done and increase your overall healing done as well. And it's going to reduce your damage taken, like I just mentioned. Mastery, let's go into haste, that's second. So haste, the reason why I rank it just below versatility is because, like I just mentioned in the dungeon priority, you're going to be tanking for a very, very long period of time. So therefore, you're going to want to have as much uptime on demon spikes as possible. It's very important that you have more uptime on demon spikes than you have a more powerful demon spikes every so often. So therefore, haste is going to help reduce that time that you have before you have another demon spikes available. Additionally, it's going to help you generate more pain and therefore do more soul cleaves and more healing, because since you're tanking for longer periods of time, you're going to need that more consistent healing rather than that kind of spiky, sort of unreliable healing that you'll get from critical strike. Mastery is ranked third because while it does increase the physical damage reduction and you might feel like you are taking a lot of damage from hard-hitting bosses, having more uptime on demon spikes is going to further increase your damage reduction throughout the fight than it will in those 6 seconds that you actually have demon spikes active. Critical strike is ranked last because, for all the reasons I've just previously mentioned, it's not as great for longer periods of fight, for longer fight periods than dungeons are. Okay, so while we're still talking about the topic of gear, let me just go into legendaries real quick and tell you what they are and which ones I think are the best. So the neck piece. After not taking damage for 5 seconds, you gain an absorb shield for 15% of your maximum health for 30 seconds. This effect may not occur once every 30 seconds. This is possibly, I think it's actually the worst legendary, because you're constantly taking damage while you're tanking, and therefore you don't really have an opportunity to generate that shield every 5 seconds. The back piece. You take 15% reduced magic damage while Immolation Aura is active. This is a very, very powerful legendary because you currently take a lot of magic damage when you don't have Empower Wards or you don't have Fiery Brand active, and those are very long cooldowns relatively, 20 seconds and 1 minute respectively. So that means that if you were to have Immolation Aura act as a damage reduction cooldown for magic damage, that just gives you more potential ways to survive, especially when you're tanking something like the Nightmare Horror in Heart of Il'gynoth, where he casts that I-beam ability very, very often. You only have, in my experience, when you're actively tanking him, you only can take at max up to 3 hits from that I-beam. So the first one you can just use Soul Cleave for, the second one you can use Empower Wards, and then the third one you can use Fiery Brand. But by the time that you go back to actively tanking him, after you switch with your co-tank, you're most likely not going to have Fiery Brand active for you. So, the first one you could take Soul Cleave, the second one you can use Empower Wards, and then the third one you could use this Immolation Aura if you have this legendary piece, just giving you a third way to reduce that magic damage. The Waste. Your attacks cause an additional 30% damage as physical to enemies above 90% health. Now, the reason why I believe that this is the waste piece is because it's definitely a waste of a legendary piece. It's just honestly garbage. Additional damage, only 30% additional damage to enemies above only 90% health. If it was possibly 70% health instead of 90, then this could be definitely in a contending spot. But currently in its state right now, it's definitely one of the worst ones. This first ring that we have available to us, successfully applying a loss of control effect to an enemy, grants you 70% increased movement speed and 15% haste for 10 seconds. This effect may occur once every 30 seconds. This one isn't that bad because as a demon hunter we do have multiple ways to actually cause a loss of control effect, and therefore we do get that increased haste. For instance, we have Sigil of Chains that will pull enemies to the location and therefore disrupting them and causing loss of control. That can trigger this proc. Additionally, we have Sigil of Misery, that will most definitely proc this because a fear is a loss of control. And if there happens to be a demon, like in Blackrock Hold, we can use our Imprison ability, which will CC one target for up to 1 minute, therefore absolutely having a chance to proc this 15% haste. Although in the grand scheme of things, it's not that powerful because it's only being able to be used on targets that can be quote-unquote stunned. So therefore, in raids, it doesn't hold much value at all, if any. The second ring that we have available to us, gain 15% leech while Demon Spikes is active. This is possibly the most powerful one, although the only issue that I have with this is that you gain only 15% leech, which isn't that much. You gain 15% leech for only 6 seconds because Demon Spikes only lasts 6 seconds. So while you might have this pretty often when you need that, because if you do need the physical damage reduction, you most likely will probably need the healing as well. So it is a nice couple, but like I said, it's only 6 seconds, so you're going to have to make sure that you gain your abilities and spells so that you actually do gain benefit from that leech. The feat. The initial damage from your Immolation Aura reduces the remaining cooldown on Fiery Brand by 2 seconds for each enemy hit. So like I mentioned before, that first explosion that comes out of you when you use Immolation Aura, that's what's going to trigger this effect. And it's going to reduce the cooldown on Fiery Brand by 2 seconds for each enemy hit. This isn't that great in raids because there's not that many adds or mobs in general in a raid fight, but in dungeons this definitely holds a lot of value, especially if you're going to be using Burning Alive, because that means that you'll be able to further reduce your damage reduction on multiple adds in a certain time frame. Wrist. Soul Cleave reduces the remaining cooldown on a random sigil by 8 seconds. You're going to be soul cleaving a lot anyway because that's the main dump of your pain and the main way that you can heal yourself. So having this 8-second cooldown reduction on a random sigil, it says random, but if only one sigil is on cooldown, that means that's the only sigil it can do that 8-second duration reduction for. So if you wanted to increase your DPS, you can only use Sigil of Flame. If you only use Sigil of Flame, therefore every time you soul cleave, you're going to have an 8-second cooldown reduction, therefore giving you more and more and more Sigil of Flames available to you. Also, if you know that you're going to be running into a group of adds that likes to do a lot of spells, such as in the boat on Maw of Souls, when you're on your way to the last boss, there's a lot of adds that like to cast stuff. So therefore, if you only used Sigil of Silence, you can game it so that you'll have that up more often. The Shoulder. Metamorphosis resets the remaining cooldown on all your sigils. If this works with Fueled by Pain on your artifact weapon, then this can possibly be one of the most powerful ones for dungeon content, because your sigils will just reset every single time that you go in. Although that metamorphosis is quite inconsistent, so it might proc when you don't have any sigils on cooldown, so it's not very effective. I would probably say the Wrist is a lot better in that case, but the ones that I think are the most powerful are possibly this ring that gives you the leech, and then the back piece that gives you that 15% reduced magic damage, and then the Wrist, and then the feet. The feet definitely climbs up in value if you are going to be using Burning Alive and if you are in Mythic Plus dungeons. If you're not using that, then the feet definitely drops lower in the list. Now, off the topic of legendaries, I believe the only thing left to do is teach you guys how to play. So I'm going to go over to the target dummy over here and kind of show you the general way that I'll play a Demon Hunter. And with this talent build that I'm running right now, this is the single target talent build. This is what you're going to be doing in raids most of the time. So what I'm going to do is, one thing that I forgot to mention is that Infernal Strike and Fiery Brand are off of the global cooldown. That means you can use them literally at any time in your rotation. You can use this right after you press Soul Cleave. You can use it right before you press Immolation Aura. So I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm going to leap in, and by the time that I get just roughly around here, when I'm in range of hitting him with my Immolation Aura, I'm going to press that at the same time, so that when I'm here, I'll press Immolation Aura, and by the time I land again, it's going to already allow me to do more abilities because I'll be off of the global cooldown by then. So let's start Immolation Aura, and then I'm going to Fell Blade right away to get that damage reduction, well, not the damage reduction, the pain going, and then I'm going to soul cleave to heal and to dump pain, and I'm going to press demon spikes in order to start to smooth out my damage reduction. I'm going to soul cleave again so I don't cap out. I'm going to press immolation aura because it's off cooldown, use fell blade because it's off cooldown, soul cleave so I don't cap, and then I'm going to do another infernal strike so I don't have it running off of the same charge. I can use Sigil of Flame to get that running on a cooldown, immolation aura to start to get that running, demon spikes to reduce my damage reduction, fell blade to get more pain, fell blade to get more pain again, shear, soul cleave because I was going to cap out if I did another fell blade, and then I'll use infernal strike and then immolation aura again, and then just continue that rotation right now. I used soul carver because I felt like I could possibly use those soul fragments because I am starting to take a little bit more damage, but in the overall grand scheme of things, it doesn't seem like I could possibly die because I am taking a lot of damage and I'm starting to slowly wither down, but I do have cooldowns at my disposal. So I have Fell Devastation, which is going to chunk me back up in health. Then I can Soul Cleave right off the bat and get a nice portion of my HP back. Additionally, I can use Fiery Brand to reduce my damage taken by 40% and giving me more chance to top myself off with Soul Cleaves. So the way that this is looking, I'm probably not going to die by this guy. It is only the Dungeoneering tanking guy. If I was doing the raid guy, I probably will only last a few seconds because I don't have a healer with me. Now I'm going to show you guys mostly how I'm going to use the DPS rotation. I'll go over to the minions over in the back here to show you guys the cooldown reduction on demon spikes while I'm using Fallout. Additionally, let me go switch off from soul rending over to feed the demon so that it actually does take effect. And basically, the way that you do this is you're going to want to weave Infernal Strike a little bit more into your rotation because it's going to give you more free Sigil of Flames and therefore more free AoE damage. So once again, let's jump in and Immolation Aura right off the bat. And then we can shear and shear and shear. And then we can Fell Devastation if we just want the damage. Sometimes you can just do that right off the bat. And the Sigil of Flame debuff fell off, so let's actually manually apply it this time and keep shearing. Using Immolation Aura and then keep shearing for more pain. Let's Soul Cleave and then Infernal Strike to not have the same cooldown running. And then just keep shearing and keep shearing and keep shearing. It's going to fall off again. We can do another one and then do Immolation Aura at the same time and just keep shearing and then more Soul Cleaves. I'm going to do a dungeon video showcasing some of these talent builds a little bit better and to showcase my thoughts as I'm playing them and my decisions while doing it. But overall, what I've showed you just now is generally the way that you're going to want to be playing your Vengeance Demon Hunter. Now, I wasn't going to die on that Dungeoneering tanking dummy like you guys saw, so I didn't really have to use Demon Spikes that often. But while you're in a raid situation, Demon Spikes, and while you're in a dungeon situation, Demon Spikes is going to have a lot more value, and therefore you're really going to have to just kind of figure out for yourself when is the best time to use that spell, because I can't really tell you while I'm on a dummy. It's just not going to work that well. I could probably tell you guys how to stagger it, but overall that's just not really the best way to play. You just have to know exactly when to do it. So maybe in some dungeon videos that I'm going to upload soon, you guys will see exactly when roughly some good times are, or roughly what's good if you're running low on HP, or if you're running low on this, or your healer's on mana, all those things. So with that, that's the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. It has been a long video, but this is a lot of good content and a lot of good information in this guide. So once again, thank you guys all for watching. Leave a comment about your progression, what you agreed and disagreed with, the talents and stat builds that I've gone over, what you think of those. Leave a comment about that, saying your thoughts. And additionally, share this video around. I know that this is possibly going to be a pretty popular video of mine, but just share it around in order to help spread that knowledge of the newest tanking class. So therefore, I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.